I'm Peter Austin. That is a severed hand on display at Whitby Museum, and this is interesting. In 1797, at Stainmore, where the A66 crosses the Pennines, an old woman wrapped up in a cloak entered the Spittal Inn, seeking shelter for the night. Landlord George Alderson, his wife and their son were actually just about to head up to bed, but their maid Bella was still tidying up after the day's business, so George left the lady in Bella's capable hands. The old woman settled into a chair and seemed quite unresponsive at the maid's attempts to make conversation, so Bella just carried on with her chores and when she was done, headed to the front door to bolt it. It was then, though, that she noticed something quite odd. Beneath the old lady's skirts, she could just about make out a pair of men's riding boots and gaiters, very unusual for an old woman to be wearing in 1797. Clearly, this was a man in disguise, and suspecting what he might be up to, Bella decided to lie down on the settee and pretend to fall asleep, keeping one eye on him as he sat in the corner. Once he was convinced he was the only person left awake in the inn, the man got up, reached into his cloak, and pulled out a severed human hand. He then placed a candle into the grip of the hand and uttered the words, "Let those who rest more deeply sleep, let those awake their vigil keep. O hand of glory, shed thy light, and guide us to our spoils tonight." What was he up to? Well, to find out, I went down to Whitby Museum to see what is thought to be the only surviving example of a hand of glory. Whitby Museum's Hand of Glory is one of its most famous exhibits, sitting in this glass case in a room that, given the slightly spooky subject matter, is rather fittingly a bit dark, so you'll have to forgive the fact that my footage came out a little grainy at times. Now, we can't say for absolute certain that this hand, which was found in a recess over a door in an old cottage in Danby, was definitely a hand of glory, but there aren't many other reasons why someone would have a withered old hand stowed away in their house, so the odds are pretty good. Whether or not this one is the real deal, though, the idea of the Hand of Glory is a pretty well documented one. This was a tool used by superstitious criminals throughout the second millennium. The earliest description of one dates back to 1440, when it was said at a coroner's court in Maidstone that a lit candle in the severed hand of a dead man that has lain in the earth 9 days and 9 nights has the power to prevent sleeping people from waking up. Other sources, written at various times right up to the 1800s, give us more details. For instance, many depictions have the fingers themselves lit as candles, rather than a candle being held within the hand's grasp. Some state that even those who are awake will be frozen in place by a lit hand of glory, while others say that the glow given off by the candle, or the lit fingertips, will only light up the darkness for the person holding the hand. All useful features for the would-be thief, but it's not surprising that hands of glory have also frequently been included in paintings of witches' Sabbaths or other occult scenes. Instructions for creating a hand of glory also vary from source to source, but one example from 1722 instructs the budding burglar to take the right or left hand of a felon who is hanging from a gibbet beside a highway, wrap it in part of a funeral pall, and so wrapped, squeeze it well. Then put it into an earthenware vessel with zymat, nitre, salt, and long peppers, the whole well powdered. Incidentally, I happen to have covered gibbets in a previous video, and though no one is certain what zymat actually refers to, I've seen discussion online that it might be iron sulfate, the main ingredient for the alchemical substance powder of sympathy, which I've also talked about, so there'll be links to both of those videos at the end of this one. Anyway, leave it in this vessel for a fortnight, then take it out and expose it to full sunlight during the dog days until it becomes quite quite dry. Next, make a kind of candle from the fat of a gibbeted felon, virgin wax, sesame, and peony, and use the hand of glory as a candlestick to hold the candle when lighted, and then those in every place into which you go with this baneful instrument shall remain motionless. Fortunately though, for quick-thinking Bella back at the Spittle Inn, there was one thing you could do to cancel the effects of a hand of glory, but we'll come back to her in just a moment. Before then though, what's with the name? I wouldn't say there's much glory in using black magic to aid a burglary. It kind of feels like cheating, to be honest, doesn't it? Well, seemingly, this is actually a bit of a misnomer. You see, the Hand of Glory has a number of folkloric links with the mandrake. Many of you will be familiar with the supposed magical properties of this real plant, thanks to its appearance in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Much of what we see in the book and film is rooted, if you'll pardon the pun, in actual folklore. The humanoid shape, the deadly scream it supposedly lets out when dug up, and its use as a potion ingredient. And incidentally, the Hand of Glory also appears in the franchise. But when it comes to mandrakes, we're interested in three specific things. Firstly, it was sometimes said to be luminous in the dark, like our magic candle. The plant's narcotic properties saw it used as an early anesthetic, sending people to sleep, and crucially, the French words for mandrake and hand of glory, respectively, are mandragore and main de gloire. Forgive my accent. You see, the concept of severed hands having magical properties predates the name Hand of Glory, which is thought to have come about around 300 years ago. The theory is that in the French language, the word mandragore happened to be corrupted to main de gloire, hand of glory, initially referring to a charm made from a piece of mandrake root. But over time, this term was adopted as a new name for those charmed severed hands that predated the phrase. But let's get back to Bella, shall we? She's waited long enough. Now, it seems the hand in this particular folktale was one of those that only keeps sleeping people asleep and doesn't affect those who are awake. And because the maid was only pretending to have a snooze, she was unaffected by the lit Hand of Glory the disguised burglar had just placed down on the table. Not realising that she was faking it though, he decided to make his way to the front door, unbolt it, and step outside, whistling into the night to alert the rest of his gang that the coast was clear. Unfortunately for him though, Bella leapt up, ran over to the door and slammed it shut behind him, locking it from the inside. But she wasn't out of the woods yet. You see, with the Hand of Glory burning on the table, the gang knew that the rest of the household was asleep, and so if they could regain entry by breaking through the door or one of the windows, they would only have one young girl to deal with. Bella desperately tried to wake George upstairs, but with the hand still lit, there was nothing she could do to rouse him. To her horror, she realised that even dousing the hand in water did nothing to put out the flames, and she even tried emptying a cup of beer onto it to no avail. As it happens, only two liquids can extinguish a Hand of Glory. One is blood, but the second, as Bella fortunately discovered on her third attempt, is milk. With the hand rendered inert, the Aldersons all immediately woke up. George grabbed his blunderbuss and fired it out of the window, but in reply, the robbers made a final attempt to bargain with the landlord, insisting that if their Hand of Glory was returned, they would leave, and no one would be harmed. George simply fired again, and then sat up all night waiting for the criminals to make another move, but by the time the sun rose, they'd gone, and the family allegedly kept the hand as a grim trophy for the next 20 years. And so goes the most famous folktale about the Hand of Glory. It makes you wonder all the more about the history of the one that's on display to this very day in Whitby. Now, needless to say, I'm not totally convinced that an 18th century criminal really put an entire family to sleep by setting fire to some human remains downstairs, but it's a good story nonetheless, and regardless of what we believe today, if the exhibit in Whitby Museum and the numerous historical sources are anything to go by, there really was once a time when a few superstitious criminals wouldn't have left home without a dead man's hand in their pocket. I've been Peter Austin, and that was interesting. If you thought so too, and you'd like to learn how sailors might have once used wounded dogs to navigate the oceans, you can click the card on screen. Or perhaps you'd like to learn a bit more about gibbets. The choice is yours.